Welcome to The Explainer. So, what really makes a product sustainable? Is it the materials it's made from? The factory where it was built? The box it comes in? Well, the truth is, it's way more complicated than you'd think. But the good news is there's a blueprint, and today we're going to break it down.
Okay, just for a second, look around you. Right now, that desk you're at, that lamp, heck, the chair you're sitting on. Is it sustainable? And how would you even begin to know? It's a surprisingly tough question, right? Because it's not just about what it's made of or where it was made. You gotta ask, what happens when you're done with it? Yeah, this is definitely not a simple yes or no question. So to get a real answer, to actually compare apples to apples, we need everyone to be speaking the same language. Companies, investors, even us, the consumers. And that right there is where something called the SASB standards come into play. They're all about creating one clear set of rules for everybody. All right, so what exactly are these standards we're talking about? Well, let's start with the big idea. They're designed to create that common language, to define what sustainability even means when you're talking about a business.
Probably the best way to get this is to think of a nutritional label on your food. You know how you can just glance at it and see the calories, the sugar, the fat, all that stuff is standardized? Well, SASB is trying to do pretty much the exact same thing, but for a company's impact on the world.
But here's the really brilliant part, and this is key. These standards are industry-specific. Think about it. The sustainability challenges for, say, a bank are completely, totally different from the challenges for a company that makes furniture. So SASB doesn't use a one-size-fits-all approach. Nope. It has a unique playbook for 77 different industries. Okay, to really see how this all works, let's get specific. We're going to zoom in on just one industry, building products and furnishings. Yep, that's everything from the floorboards to your office chair. Let's pull up their blueprint and see what it says. So every single one of these industry standards is built on the same 5-step framework. It's pretty logical. First, you define the industry. Then you figure out the big sustainability topics that matter for that industry. From there, it gets really granular. You get the specific metrics, the technical rules for how to measure them, and then finally, some metrics to give it all scale and context. It's basically a complete roadmap from A to Z. Okay, check this out. These are the big topics for our furniture industry example. And what you'll notice right away is the mix. Some of these, like energy management, are quantitative. That means they're all about hard numbers. But then you have others, like the one we've highlighted, product lifecycle environmental impacts. That one is qualitative. It requires companies to tell a story. And that's the one we're going to focus on for the rest of this explainer, that product lifecycle topic. Why? Because it goes way beyond just the numbers. It's about the entire story of a product, from the moment it's conceived to the day it dies. And honestly, this is where some of the coolest innovation is actually happening. And this really gets us to the heart of the matter for any physical thing you can buy. A product's environmental footprint isn't just what happens inside the factory walls. No, it's the whole journey. It starts when the raw materials are literally pulled out of the ground, and it doesn't end until that product is in a landfill, or hopefully somewhere much, much better. This quote is actually pulled right from the SASB standard, and it just nails the complexity of it all. It means a company can't just think about the wood it uses for a chair. It has to think about the gas for the truck that delivers it, the electricity for the factory. And here's the kicker. What happens when that chair breaks, or you just don't want it anymore? That's the critical piece. See, what this framework does is it forces companies to think about that end-of-life problem right from the get-go, at the design stage. It's all about pushing them away from that old linear take-make-waste model and towards something called a circular model, where you literally design waste out of the system from the very beginning. Okay, so if it's not just about crunching numbers, what does a company actually have to do? What do they report? This is where we get into those qualitative metrics we mentioned. It's called discussion and analysis, and it's where companies have to lay out their game plan, their actual strategies for managing a product's whole life. So what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, the standard isn't looking for some fluffy mission statement about being green. No way. It asks companies to get specific about the tools they're using and the design choices they're making to handle their product's impact from cradle to grave. The first major tool they have to talk about is something called a Lifecycle assessment, or LCA. The best way to think about it is like a full environmental biography for a product. It tracks everything. We're talking energy, emissions, water use, from the second the raw materials are sourced all the way until it's thrown out. It is the only way to get the full picture of a product's real impact.
Okay, so once you've done that deep dive biography, the LCA, the next step is to create an Environmental Product Declaration, or an EPD. And if the LCA is the detailed investigation, the EPD is the public report card. It's basically that nutritional label we were talking about earlier. It takes all that super complex data and boils it down into a simple, standardized format so you can finally compare one chair to another.
And this is how reporting actually pushes for real change. The standard basically forces companies to answer a bunch of really important questions, like, hey, did you design this thing so it can be taken apart easily? Are you using recycled stuff? Do you have a take-back program for when it's old? See? It demands action, not just a bunch of analysis.
So what you get is this massive shift in thinking. Instead of worrying about waste at the end, companies have to build that end-of-life thinking right into the product's DNA from day one. It's proactive, not reactive. It's all about designing for a circle, not a one-way street to the dump.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. Why does any of this matter? I mean, why does making a company write a report actually change anything? How does just talking about this stuff lead to real, tangible innovation?
Well, here's the before and after. Before these kinds of standards, all we had were these fuzzy marketing words like eco-friendly or green. It was impossible to know what was real and what was just greenwashing. But with a standard like SASB, suddenly you have verifiable data, you have clear metrics, you have accountability, you have real information that we can all use to make smarter choices.
And this is really the bottom line. The simple act of having to report this stuff creates a massive incentive to actually get better at it. I mean, think about it. If you have to publicly announce your plan for taking products back at the end of their life, you're probably going to make sure you have a pretty good plan, right? In other words, reporting drives real performance.
Which leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought. For really the first time, we have a system that lets us see the whole story behind the things we buy. The tools are there. They're in our hands as consumers and investors. So the big question is, now that we can ask for the full story, will we?